Hello again, I'm Mark McIntire, and welcome back to Voices of Santa Barbara. We're going to have a very large audience, more so than usual today because of the front page of The Independent, Newsmakers with Jerry Roberts. He wrote an article about it on his website, and also I have put up here on my computer the front page of the Santa Barbara News Press. And, of course, everybody seems to be talking about this, and in a few minutes I'm going to introduce attorney EricEarly, who is the attorney for a group called Fair Education Santa Barbara. They have, through the good auspices of attorney EricEarly, have filed a lawsuit in federal court yesterday, and they are suing Santa Barbara Unified School District Board and an organization called Just Communities Central Coast. And the predicate of the lawsuit is that a parents group targets this material provided by Just Communities Central Coast as being anti-white, anti-male, anti-Christian. Very serious charges. And we're going to dive right into the substance of the lawsuit because we actually have attorney EricEarly online. Good morning, Eric. How are you, sir?
I am very good. Good morning, Mark.
And good morning, Santa Barbara. Anyway, please help us to drill down beyond these headlines that are swirling around and has people talking all over town. How did you get involved in this controversy between the Fair Education Santa Barbara and Just Communities Central Coast? How did you personally, as an attorney, get involved in this?
Well, Mark, I was one of the candidates for California Attorney General in the last election cycle,
right?
And a group of concerned Santa Barbara parents who had known about me contacted me really out of the blue about this Just Communities Central Coast situation,
mm-hmm.
and retained me to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I got involved, and that's how I've learned about this situation in Santa Barbara.
Mm-hmm. Now, the front page of the Santa Barbara News Press has a very intriguing table, forms of oppression. Allegedly, this table comes from the actual teaching materials of Just Communities Central Coast, who are under contract, as I understand it, are under contract with the Santa Barbara Unified School District to actually implement this curriculum, which, if you read the chart, maintains that if you are a white male, well-to-do, elderly, heterosexual individual, and a Christian, then you are one of the oppressors in society that is causing all of the problems of society. And if we just dismantle these groups of people, I don't know how they're going to dismantle, then everything is going to be fine. Am I reading this accurately?
Well, you are reading it accurately. All the problems in modern society are our fault, Mark. So I just want you to be aware of that. And
well, I'm not in the wealthy category, so can I get a hall pass? I mean, can I get some excuse? I do qualify in many of the other categories, white male and all the so why in the world would a school board contract with an organization that calls itself Just Communities, and yet their curriculum is anti-white, anti-male, anti-Christian, anti-heterosexual, anti-elderly, it goes on and on. I mean, why is there any rhyme? Is there any defense for this curriculum that you can think of?
Well, I don't know if they're anti-elderly, by the way. That I have not read that in any of their materials. This is what this organization does, and I just want to be clear at the outset here that the entity that I represent, called Fair Education Santa Barbara, supports all all people of all races, creeds, colors, religions, sexual orientation. But what they do not support is a group such as Just Communities that is overtly anti-white, anti-Christian, anti-male, and it's overtly shown in their own materials. So I want to be clear about that. Mm-hmm. And I also want to let your listeners know, Mark, that I have been contacted, and other people involved in fair education, Santa Barbara, have been contacted by people across the the spectrum of races, nationalities, genders, who are against what JCC is teaching to the students of Santa Barbara and to the teachers of Santa Barbara. So, any effort by JCC to try and portray us as something that we're not will simply be wrong. I've been contacted, for example, by several Hispanic Americans who have been part of our great country for many years, who have worked hard, within the American system, who have become successful in their own right, who are really outraged at seeing an outfit like Just Communities try and turn Hispanics into victims. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, our support comes across the board here, and I'm proud to be representing Fair Education Santa Barbara in this action.
Mm-hmm. Well, and, to continue the News Press article, for those of you who haven't read it, in a 20-page lawsuit that Mr. Early has filed, and about 180 pages of exhibits filed late Monday in U.S. District Court in Los Angeles, a nonprofit called Fair Education Santa Barbara Incorporated argues that the training programs provided by Just Communities Central Coast, recently adopted by the district, are radical, discriminatory, and illegal. Now, during our time together, I don't know how much time you really have. I know you're a busy attorney and you may have to run off to a deposition or a court filing or whatever. But for whatever time we do have together, Eric, I'd like to share your thoughts with our audience about why you think that they are radical, discriminatory, and illegal. We'll just take those three categories. First of all, why are they radical?
Well, they're radical in that they are espousing blatantly and overtly and proudly espousing a form of racism. Mm-hmm. And they're radical because they're taking that anti-white ideology and teaching the most vulnerable minds in our society, the children, the young children, and the teachers that teach the children.
Do you think that do you think that perhaps that this is why you're getting reaction across the political spectrum and the racial spectrum is because people just don't like the idea of teachers messing with the minds of their kids? Is that something that is drilled down to here? Is that what you're getting at?
It's certainly one of the reasons why I'm hearing from folks. Mm-hmm. We don't want the most vulnerable people in our society, our children, to be indoctrinated with these kind of thoughts. Especially in a school setting, if you happen to be a Caucasian parent and you're sending your child to the Santa Barbara Unified School District, this is what they get taught, that they somehow are oppressing their schoolmates. It's really outrageous. And it appears to be a concerted effort by the folks on the other side to do just that. And so that's why this lawsuit was filed. I'll tell you another thing, Mark. We've heard from teachers, and we hear anonymously from teachers who don't want their names put out there about how when they have gone through this training, they've been shocked to see what they are being taught and told. These teachers are very concerned about coming out publicly because they're very concerned about having their livelihoods destroyed, their reputations destroyed, and everything else you can imagine. But many of these teachers are incredibly troubled by what they have seen and witnessed firsthand with this outfit. And let me add another thing. You know, what Just Community Central Coast purportedly provides is what's called implicit bias training, or it's sometimes referred to as unconscious bias training, and diversity training. And many, if not all, perhaps all districts and schools in the country are providing this kind of training these days. Mm-hmm. My clients are not against such training. Mm-hmm. All right? And there are, if you just Google unconscious bias training, you will see it's become a growth industry. Mm-hmm. There are scores and scores of individuals and mm-hmm. companies and public outfits that provide such training.
Well, you know, we're coming up on...
But what we're against is this racist, anti-white, anti-Christian training. That's what we're against.
We're going to take a little break here, Eric. Please stay on the line with us, and folks at home and listening on the stream, please stay with us, because there's a lot more to this story that Eric can explain to you. I am Mark McIntire. This is Voices of Santa Barbara, and we'll be right back. Stay with us. And we're back here with attorney EricEarly, and EricEarly has and his law firm in Los Angeles. They're located in the Canyon of Lawyers on Wilshire Boulevard, actually, and they have filed a federal lawsuit against the Santa Barbara Unified School District Board of Directors. Is it directors or trustees? Eric, is it directors or trustees? I always get that confused with these people. Do you know? Eric?
Well, we have sued the school district directly.
Okay. So the district. Okay. So we'll leave it at that. In any case, I want to follow up on what you were talking about during our first segment, and I'm very familiar with this phenomenon. When people are threatened with firing, threatened with demotion, threatened with pay cuts, unless they toe the political correct line at their job site, or at their country club, or at their private club, or at their beach club, or in their coffee clutch, or their book club. There is a great tendency for these individuals to remain quiet, remain anonymous. Do you think that the filing of your lawsuit, in and of itself, will allow people to come forward and to tell their horror stories with respect to the curriculum of Just Community Central Coast?
Well, I have a two-part answer for that. The answer is yes. I do know that it's allowing more and more people to come forward, because mm-hmm. even since we filed it, I've been hearing from other people I haven't heard from yet, and we just filed this the day before yesterday. Mm-hmm. But my second part is I don't know yet how many of those folks, or how many folks that I have still yet to hear from, or who I've heard from in the past, mm-hmm. will be willing to come out publicly rather than continue to remain anonymous. Mm-hmm. And it's a tough thing for people to do, to come out and in this day and age, in this politically supercharged climate, and in this climate where if you say something that is, for example, not politically correct, you will be attacked in every way somebody can think of attacking you personally, professionally, your family, and your livelihood, everything. So it takes a lot of guts for people to come out and talk about this stuff in this society. But when you know you're right, and when you know that you're not what you will be mislabeled as, mm-hmm. then you come out and do it. And when you feel strongly enough about this, as more and more people are feeling, you come out and you tell the truth, and you fight it, and you get to the bottom of it. Like I said, if the school district has to have diversity training, fine. Just use an organization that is not taking one race, mm-hmm. one religion of people, mm-hmm. and destroying it and tearing it down and blaming it for the ills of everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you're listening, folks, here, you're listening to Mr. Eric Early of Early, Sullivan, Wright, Geiser, and McRae, and they're a law firm on Wilshire Boulevard, 17th floor in Los Angeles, California. And they have filed a lawsuit on behalf of a group called Fair Education Santa Barbara. And full disclosure, I am a member of the board of that organization, as well as I serving as the secretary, recording secretary. So I get to do all the minutes. In any case, I want to continue this narrative because, Eric, I think you've landed on something that's very important. Many of our citizens who are upset about the fact that 38%, I was reading this from the Journal of Higher Education this morning, preparing for my show here, 38% of high school students that were polled by the Journal for Higher Education report that America is a racist society. I was born in 1944, and the idea that people in my elementary school or my high school would think that America was a racist society is an unheard of concept. And do you think that now, obviously, these 38% of high school students who think that America is a racist society, they get this from somewhere. They either get it from their parents, or they get it from teachers, or both, or they get it from some church group or some organization. I doubt that, but it's possible. So, do you think that this type of indoctrination by Just Communities Central Coast, do you think it's actually having an effect, that it's turning the children's mind into accepting without question that we are a systemically racist country and our education is systemically racist? Do you think that's happening?
Well, listen, I'm not an educator. I'm not a psychologist, but I do try and work on common sense. Mm-hmm. And I firmly believe that if you look at the materials, and I know you've seen them, Mark, that we've attached to our complaint, mm-hmm. and if the good folks of Santa Barbara look at the materials of Just Communities that we've attached to our complaint, mm-hmm. They will come away thinking that the answer is quite likely yes, that these materials are indoctrinating the youth of Santa Barbara to believe the way you're suggesting. And one of the great ironies, of course, of that is that if there is any actor in this situation that can be called racist, it is Just Communities Central Coast, mm-hmm. and those that enable Just Communities Central Coast, mm-hmm. because unlike Just Communities Central Coast statements in its documents, white people are not the only people that can be racist. All kinds of people can be racist. Mm-hmm. And when you look at these documents, you come away with the very strong position that there is one racist actor here, and it's Just Community Central Coast.
Yeah, well, I'm holding in my hands now a printed copy of Just Communities training manuals, and I'd like to go over some of these things with you because I think that our audience will appreciate the fact that embedded in their own language is their own self-condemnation. I'm reading from a sheet of paper that says working assumptions about dismantling oppression. Now, this really is interesting. How do you dismantle something? I mean, I could dismantle a clock, I could dismantle a car, but how do you dismantle oppression? So this is the title of their document. Let me just go through some. Number 2 is really something. Oppression, it says, based upon notions of race, is pervasive in the United States society and many other society and hurts us all, although in different and distant ways. It's a passive-aggressive sentence to begin with, but it's pervasive in the United States. So the 38% of high school students that I referenced from the Journal of Higher Education, here it is. And by the way, Just Communities Central Coast is not just here in Santa Barbara. It's up there in Santa Maria. I believe they're also in Ventura. I believe they're in Los Angeles. I may be wrong about that, but this is part of a nationwide attempt to control the school boards of our public school system and to present only one perception of racism and only one perception of the oppressors and the oppressees of our society. We have just seemed to have accepted without comment that racism is systemically based in our society. It has to come from teachers, or it comes from the family. What's your reaction to that?
Well, my reaction is that listen, there's racism in the society. All I'm saying is it's not just white people. Racism, crosses all barriers, all races, religions, etc. Mm-hmm. It exists. Mm-hmm. Don't simply claim and assert that there's only one group mm-hmm. That is racist and that they are the ones keeping everybody else down.
Okay, their third working assumption is this: racism is both a system of oppression / disadvantage and a system of advantage / benefit. There is also true of other. This is also true of other forms of oppression: sexism, heterosexism, classism, and ageism. Now, I don't even know what heterosexism means. I've never seen the word before. Who invents these words? Where do they come from?
Well, I don't know who invents them, but these words are out there now, Mark. But, also in their table of forms of oppression, it's going back to the subject of racism mm-hmm. and just showing how these folks pointed all at white people. Mm-hmm. They have a table. Under form of oppression, they have the word racism. Then under privileged group, it says white people. Mm-hmm. And under target group, it says people of color. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons why this lawsuit has been brought. You cannot just point all of the ills at one group of people.
Well, we're going to explore that.
That in itself is mm-hmm. racism.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah. And then, and their positions go on and on like that. And we've heard from these teachers, as I said, they will go to these courses. Many of them, when they go for the first time, they're going, they're told to go by the school. They don't know what they're about to walk into. They go into it, and we've been told by the white teachers are separated out from the other the folks, the people of color, and they're separated into a separate group. And the white teachers are told that they are racist, mm-hmm. whether they know it or not. They are racist. If they don't know it, then unconsciously they are racist. This is what they're taught, and when some of these folks speak up in class, we've been told this. They are then told, they are basically stopped from defending themselves, and when they do defend themselves, that is turned on them again as yet another example of how they are racist, but they don't know it.
We're going to pick this up after the break. Stay with us. Eric Early, stay with us, please. Folks at home, this is AM 1290, Voices of Santa Barbara. All right, we are back, and we're speaking with, by phone, attorney Eric Early. And Eric is the attorney who has filed the much talked about here in Santa Barbara federal lawsuit, and that claims that there is collusion, for one thing, between the Santa Barbara City College, the Santa Barbara Unified School District, and Just Communities Central Coast. We'll get to the cross-pollination of individuals on both boards in a minute, but I want to pick up on what Eric was talking about just before we hit the break, and that is the technique with which the Just Communities Santa Barbara uses to indoctrinate. During the break, I was letting Eric in on the fact that in 2011, when I was teaching at Santa Barbara City College, we were brainwashed for 3 hours by the Just Communities Central Coast. We were forced to sit quietly and listen to the fact that we were racists. And they use the words. I mean, they actually use the words that white people are racist, that we are, especially white males. And we better be careful because we're a diminishing population and we're going to be overtaken by blacks and Hispanics. And so we better really be careful and change our ways or we're going to be wiped out. So do you have any other instances of how they actually indoctrinate? You were saying that they separate out the by skin color people whose skin is white or looks white to them, and then they grind them into dust by accusing them of being racist. Do they do the same thing for members of the other group, Christians, for instance, and what are the other wealthy people, heterosexuals? Do they do the same thing for that?
I have not heard that.
Okay.
But let me say another thing, because, when you really dig into the materials of JCC, it is, in many instances, really an organization against that espouses sort of an agenda that's not only against white people, but it's against people who have made it in society of all races, creeds, and colors. Mm-hmm. They are all, even though the materials don't come out and overtly say this, you can see it and you can hear it from talking to people. People have made it in society, and you don't have to be rich to make it. Just have a thriving life, and you've worked hard, and you're working hard. And your family members work hard, and you have a family, or you're thinking and hoping to have a family one day. These folks are all part of the unsaid oppressor group, and it's incredibly troubling, to say the least.
I just want to let our audience know that if you're really interested in getting involved in this whole kerfuffle between the Unified School Board and the Just Communities Central Coast, along with Fair Education Santa Barbara, the people who are opposing that contract, you can contact Eric Early directly at early@earlysullivan.com, or you can simply call the law offices of Eric Early down there in Los Angeles at area code 323-301-4660. That's 323-301-4660. Or you can just jump on the Facebook page. The organization Fair Education Santa Barbara has a Facebook presence, and just type in the search box and just type Fair Education Santa Barbara, and you'll get there. All right, let's drill down into the actual filing for this episode here, or this section of our program today. There are 7 counts that you stipulate in the lawsuit that you filed, and off microphone, you were letting me know that they actually are all the same count. But I'm impressed by the fact that each of the counts goes through first, I'll just read count number 1.
Before you read it, Mark, let me just say something. They are not the same count. They are counts based on different federal statutes and different state statutes. Mm-hmm. But as you will hear when I explain it, the majority of these counts, not all of them, and the majority of the statutes upon which they are based are on the books, either both federal and state statutes, mm-hmm. to prevent unlawful discrimination mm-hmm. Of all sorts. Mm-hmm. But with that said, go for it.
Yeah, I noticed in the first count you cite Title 6 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, U.S. Code 2000, throughout, by intentionally supporting, promoting, and implementing Just Community Central Coast programming in the Santa Barbara Unified School District schools with knowledge of its racially discriminatory content and application, which has created a racially hostile educational environment for teachers and students who are, wait for it, Caucasian. Comment.
Well, Were you reading from count one there?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
at 34. Yeah.
Count one is based on a federal statute, which is Title VI of the Civil Rights Act.
Mm-hmm.
And that federal statute prevents discrimination on the basis of race and religion.
Mm-hmm.
So, your listeners have heard enough of what I had to say today to know that that's why we brought a count based on that claim and based on that statute. Another one of the ironies we're dealing with here is that for many years, these statutes, and really throughout American history and throughout the time that these laws came into effect, these laws were used to protect, racial minorities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And these laws were a good thing, and they are a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the ironies here is it's being used to protect a race which most people would not consider to be a minority,
mm-hmm.
which also, interestingly enough, in the Santa Barbara Unified School District, it's my understanding that the Caucasian race is the minority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so anyhow, so that's why we brought that claim.
Yeah, yeah, and count two has the similar language based upon. I'll just read the tag to it, which has created a hostile educational environment for teachers and students who are Caucasian, Christian, and or male. So you include all of the groups that are really on the chart that's on the front page of the Santa Barbara News Press this morning.
Well, yeah, that's count two is based on federal statute 42 U.S.C. section 1983, which prevents intentional discrimination on the basis of race, ethnicity, religion, and sex.
Right. And then you have a violation of California government code 11135, and I believe that's the section that you're citing in count three. And here you're shifting the legal ground, which is really impressive to me that you're so comprehensive in including both the federal and the state illegalities, as you are claiming in the lawsuit. California Code 11135 prohibits discriminatory and or denial of the full and equal access to the benefits of any program or activity that is conducted, operated, or administered by the state or by any state agency, is funded directly by the state, or receives any financial assistance from the state on the basis of race, sex, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, or ethnic group identification, among other things.
Right. So that's a California statute,
right?
That generally tracks some of these federal statutes that I've told you about. So we're suing based on violations of federal and state law. And then if you go to count 6, for example,
mm-hmm.
Count 6 is an interesting one because it's based on a different allegation of wrongdoing against the defendant.
Yeah, take us through that one, would you please, Eric?
All right. So on count 6, we're suing for violation of California Public Contract Code Section 20111. Now that requires, pursuant to California state law, that if a school district wants to hire somebody, a vendor, a service provider, etc., in a contract that will pay more than $50,000, then that school district is required to submit the program or the thing that services are needed for to the public, to be bid by the public, to be bid on by public providers, companies out there across the state, individuals out there across the state. It's right there in the books,
mm-hmm.
and it's done to prevent, among other things, favoritism, meaning just, favorites of somebody on the school board, for example, of getting hired to the exclusion of others. It's done to help ensure that the district can get quality services for proper pricing and not be gouged, for example. It's
mm-hmm.
done to prevent fraud in the contracting process. It's done for various reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And And we told the school board before they entered into this contract with Just Community Central Coast that they were required to submit this contract for public bidding. And they told us back, no, we're not required to do so. And in our case, it's particularly disturbing because we've obtained evidence of what appear to be and what we're alleging to be various conflicts of interest between the school board and the school district on the one hand, and Just Community Central Coast on the other hand. And I could just give you examples. I mean, there's a
Well, what we're going to do, we're going to pick that up in the next segment after our break. We get about another 30 seconds in this section here. But I just want to reinforce that this was not put out to public bidding, and this is part of the central part of the lawsuit that you have filed, that state law has been violated in that this contract between the Santa Barbara Unified School District and JCCC, Just Community Central Code, that was not put out for bidding, and that is against the law.
Correct.
All right. We're going to take our break, and when we pick up, we're going to go into the cross-pollination between the two organizations, the school board and JCCC. Wait till you hear about this. My goodness, stay with us. All right. Well, the phones are ringing off the hook, but we're not going to be taking calls, folks. What we encourage you to do is to go to the Facebook page of Fair Education Santa Barbara and sign up and become a member. It's free, and if you do make a donation to the cause, it is a 501c3, so it is tax deductible. And you don't have to give your name, and if you're still afraid of being persecuted or prosecuted by those in charge here of our school district, then you can communicate with us anonymously, and we really appreciate that. So the Facebook page is simply called Fair Education Santa Barbara. Jump on there, and you'll find all kinds of interesting things. All right, we've only got about 10 more minutes with Attorney EricEarly, and I want to thank you for taking a whole hour out of your very busy day to be with us and walk us through the lawsuit. We don't get a chance to do this very often. I want to call your attention to the cross-pollination problem between the population of the school board and the population of the Board of Trustees or the Board of Directors of Just Communities Central Coast. So I'm just going to toss it to you. Can you inform us about that, please, Eric?
Briefly, we've heard from various people in the community that have told us things such as the following. One of the current school board members who was just removed from the board by the election, thankfully, his name Ismail Uloa, he voted to approve this contract and when he was sitting on the board, and he was a paid teacher, we've been told, for Just Communities in the past. Another woman named Annette Cordero was a two-term member of the school board and is currently a member of Just Communities Board of Directors. The former superintendent of the school district, named Dave Cash, was instrumentally involved in bringing in JCC in the first place, and he currently sits on the Board of Directors. There's a woman named Monique Lemon who was a school board member in the past, and she currently sits on one of the groups that is a major source of funding for JCC. So the list goes on, and this is one of the main reasons why we have this state statute that requires that you submit these contracts for public bidding. So we don't have a situation like we have here where we have a very incestuous situation and you have enablers and major supporters of Just Communities sitting on the board and voting in favor of the board. This is of the contract. This is the very kind of favoritism that the statute seeks to avoid. And so the main thing that we're seeking by this lawsuit is to have this contract with Just Communities thrown out. The first thing we're going to do, and it's going to be happening any day now, is it could happen as early as today, quite honestly, is we will be filing a motion for preliminary injunction with the federal court where this case is pending here in Los Angeles, and we expect that there will be a hearing on it sometime in January. and we will ask that this contract be frozen in place until we can get the ultimate ruling of having the contract thrown out and the board being required to submit this kind of programming to the public for bid.
Yeah. We're going to take, believe it or not, we're up against another break. I just want to point out that Monique Limon, she's actually in the State Assembly. So she's had quite a career in terms of this school board and JCCC. We're going to take our final break, and then we'll be back with a wrap-up of this lawsuit by our attorney, Eric Early. Stay with us. And we're back with the final segment of Voices of Santa Barbara with Mark McIntire. We're here with Richard Dugan, our trusty engineer. Thank you, Richard, for piping us through to Eric Early down there in Los Angeles. You do a superb job. We really appreciate it. Yeah, we just finished the segment where we have the almost incestuous relationship between the Santa Barbara Unified School District Board and the Just Communities Central Coast Board. We have people working as teachers for the Just Communities, and now they also have been members of the school board or employees of the school board. So this is being our last segment, Eric. I just want to throw it back to you and ask you to tell our listeners, what do you hope to accomplish? What does Fair Education Santa Barbara hope to accomplish by filing this lawsuit? And what if you don't get your injunction successfully accepted by the court? You know, what's the future going to be like?
Well, Fair Education Santa Barbara, the name sort of says what we want. We want fair education in Santa Barbara. Mm-hmm. And that will start with this lawsuit if we're successful having this relationship thrown out, this contract thrown out. Our motion for preliminary injunction, which will be filed, will be based on the fact that the contract was not submitted for public bidding, and we'll be seeking a ruling on that. If we don't prevail on the motion for preliminary injunction, that is by no means the end of the lawsuit. Then we continue to litigate it in the court, as you would any lawsuit, to try and prevail on all of our counts. But at the end of the day, we've seen what Just Communities Central Coast is about. We've heard Just Communities Central Coast spin on what it purports to teach and not teach, which in so many instances is just simply contradicted by their own writings and by the statements we've received from people who have participated. So that's our goal with this lawsuit, is fair education for the students of Santa Barbara, and to have a different provider for these particular services. Yeah,
so just to be clear, as a wrap-up here, Fair Education Santa Barbara is not against teaching social issues and talking about race and talking about sexuality and talking about ethnicity. We're not opposed to that as a group. And the lawsuit does not propose that. But what the lawsuit proposes and what Fair Education Santa Barbara is opposed to is that there's only one voice that's being heard. There's only one point of view that's being heard, and to the exclusion of all others. The second point is we're paying for our own demise. We're using tax dollars to undermine the principles and the values of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution of the United States. And that, I think, is why you've got the 14th Amendment and the First Amendment issues locked into the lawsuit. So,
Mark, let me read the first paragraph of the complaint that we filed, which pretty much says it all. Plaintiff Fair Education Santa Barbara brings this action to help ensure that the Santa Barbara Unified School District provide every student, irrespective of race, ethnicity, culture, and sexual orientation, the opportunity to achieve his or her highest ability and potential.
Yeah, I see that. Well, that's the secret. I can tell you that having spent 23 years as a professor of philosophy at Santa Barbara City College, it's not the same place that I first signed on to. There is only one voice that's acceptable. There's only one point of view that's acceptable, and it is not an open, critical thinking college or university anymore. And by the way, Just Communities is actually a national group, isn't it? It's not just here on the Central Coast. Am I right about that, Eric?
I don't believe you're right about that. I mean, I know it's affiliated with other such outfits in other parts of the country and perhaps is affiliated with national groups. But it's my understanding Just Community Central Coast is set up specifically for the Central Coast of California.
All right, I'm going to do my research on that because I don't want to misstate any of the claims that we're making here. We've only got a couple of minutes left. I'm going to let you go, and we've got 30 seconds. I'm getting the signal there. Thank you so much, Eric Early, for being with us and explaining the lawsuit. I am Mark McIntire. Thank you so much for being with us, and stay tuned for next week.